would like to speak now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. The suggested numbers, 20,000 for the resettlement scheme and 40,000 for the relocation scheme, seem to me unrealistically small if we compare them to the overall number of people who come to Europe or who are in the refugee camps in the conflict areas. So do you believe that these schemes have any chance of discouraging people from using the irregular routes to Europe anyway? So are they a solution, or are they just conveniently small numbers that you can sell to the public in Europe? And we have heard that a growing share of those who cross the Mediterranean are not actually coming from Syria or other conflict areas, but are rather economic migrants from Western Africa and elsewhere. So my question is it the idea that these people will be included in the relocation schemes, or will the asylum applicants be somehow pre-screened or pre-assessed before they are relocated among the member states? And one final comment. As Mrs. Metsola said, attention must be paid to successful integration of immigrants. It seems to be a fact that no Western European country has been very successful in integrating humanitarian immigrants in large numbers. The question is it likely that these problems, social and economic and even political problems, will be eased if the numbers increase dramatically? Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, I'll try and be very brief also because I know that we're running out of time. I just wanted to come back to a couple of points that have been mentioned by a number of you in the room today. One is on, as you know, Mr. Turk mentioned in his statement at the beginning of the session that we have supported the relocation and resettlement proposals by the European Commission recently, but I think that we also need to be realistic and recognise that, yes, it is not by having relocation of 40,000 who are people who've actually already arrived into Europe anyway, and by addressing having a resettlement programme of 20,000 that we are going to solve all these issues of people arriving in an irregular manner to Europe. And that's why it's so very much important to focus on this, on the holistic approach. It has to be seen as one measure amongst a number of others that need to be taken. And in that sense, of course, we do welcome it very much, but we mustn't forget that we need to also look at what is making these people move on, at the root causes in their countries of origin, but also the factors that are pushing people who may have been refugees for numbers of years in other countries, in countries surrounding Syria, for example, but countries like Kenya, Ethiopia, Sudan, Egypt, all these countries, what pushes them to move on from there, and how we can reinforce support and assistance to them in those countries as well. And it is, as I said, a package of measures that need to be taken, of which legal avenues is just one aspect, that, of course, from our perspective, also a very important one. There were also a couple of questions, I think, specifically to UNHCR on things like examples of private sponsorship programs in other countries. Australia was mentioned. Canada also has a very well-developed private sponsorship program, and I think Germany, in the context of Syrians, has also had a limited private sponsorship program, but we'd be more than happy to have discussions and to share information separately with those of you who would like to hear more about that. A question on resettlement and the criteria for resettlement. Well, UNHCR has been involved with a number of countries, including a number of EU member states, of course, on resettlement for many years, and there are well-established criteria for referring resettlement cases, including legal and physical protection needs of persons, women at risk, and people with specific needs or vulnerabilities. So these are the most well-known criteria, and it's on that basis that UNHCR undertakes a first screening of individuals, but of course all the countries involved in accepting people for resettlement are very much involved in this issue as well, and it's not just UNHCR who's selecting and processing people. And the final point I wanted to make was to come back to the issue of distribution keys and the criteria that can be used for that. The Commission's proposal has already identified some criteria. Yes, there can be many discussions on inclusions of other criteria for a distribution key. The key challenge from our perspective is, and it goes a bit to also what you were referring to, is this whole issue of preferences, and should the preferences of individuals be factored into this or not. At the moment in the Commission's proposal as it stands, preferences of individuals of course is not a part of that. We can have many discussions on how or whether that should be included at all. It's quite interesting when you contrast it with resettlement from countries out of, like Kenya or others, because in those circumstances preferences of individuals are very much limited. Of course we look at issues like family reunification and to a certain extent linguistic, educational background, all these issues are factors that are taken into account, but ultimately we don't have so much choice when speaking to individuals who are in the resettlement process to necessarily take their preferences into account, but it still seems to work. People seem to understand that this is the opportunity that they have, and as long as information is provided to them about what to expect both before departure and upon arrival, it does, not always, but for the most part, it does work. So I'll end with that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I'm grateful to all our speakers. But now, just to end this particular part of our